We do a bit of everything. We're experts and we're beginners. We're wild. We're flashy. We're fancy. And sometimes we're quiet. We blaze new trails and we honor the classics. But no matter who we are or where we live, we are all still learning.
Welcome. This is the Tequila 101 seminar for Tales of the Cocktail. Thank you to Beam Suntory for sponsoring this. And we are going to get going here and kind of give you all the basics on tequila, what you need to know, and then just how to support the category. So my name is Ivy Mix. I am a bar owner and operator. I own a bar called Leyenda in Brooklyn, New York. I'm also the author of a new book called Spirits of Latin America, a celebration of culture and cocktails with 100 recipes from Leyenda and beyond. And I have spent my entirety of my career that started in 2005 specializing in agave spirits. So I'm very excited to be here with one of the most brilliant minds in agave, David Suro, who I will let introduce himself.
Thank you, Ivy. Well, it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be not just at Tales of the Cocktail, but presenting with you. And, this is, I was going through my notes, and this is 10 years that I've been involved with Tales of the Cocktail. And, I've been doing besides the agave spirits industry, I'm involved in the restaurant industry also. I've been operating a restaurant in Philadelphia since 1986. It's a Mexican restaurant that specializes in not just in culinary aspects of the Mexican culture, but also in agave spirits. And besides the restaurant, I also run a company that imports spirits from Mexico. Suro International Imports, and under our portfolio we have tequilas, mezcales, and also a Mexican rum and ponches and liquors from Mexico. So it is a pleasure to be part of this new normal on education seminars. So thank you for inviting me. Great.
Yes. Awesome. So in the interest of time, we're going to give a rundown here, starting with let's talking about what is tequila even. Why are we giving this seminar? We'll give you some definitions about the history of it, how it's made, and then at the end, some of the uses of tequila in both classic and non-classic cocktails. So to start off, let's ask what is tequila? Tequila, the definition, is a distilled beverage from the agave plant. So which agave plant? The Tequiliana Weber, the blue agave. This can be made in one of 5 different states within Mexico: Jalisco, Guanajuato, Michoacan, Nayarit, and Tamaulipas. And we are going to discuss a little bit now about its history, the importance of tequila, and kind of how we got to where we are now, which is one of the largest, fastest growing categories of distillates in America and across the world, and how we got there based on this very old spirit. So to start off, David, I'd like to talk a little bit about where did tequila begin? What is the history of tequila? How did we get here now from where we all began? I'm going to have you kind of chime in on that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic to try to understand and to dig into the history. Where is the genesis for this spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Through my years doing research, I've been spending some time in the mountains of the Sierra Madre, and we came across producers that use a very interesting apparatus for distillation. Nothing related to the Arabic distills that were introduced by the Spaniards during the colonial times, during the conquer. So it's always a question mark. It was a question mark where it comes from. But I'm very excited to see that is some archaeologists and anthropologists and historians. They've been coming with a very interesting propositions of the origins of the distillation in Mesoamerica. And there is enough evidence right now to make us believe that these spirits, they've been present in the Mesoamerican cultures for at least 3,500 years. There is enough evidence.
Predates, right? That predates what we would think of as distillation happening in the Americas, right?
That's correct. Look, this is a replica. This is a replica that it's one of my most precious possessions. It's a replica of the Capacha vessel. This was given to me by Fernando González Osaya, which is one of the archaeologists that is working in one of the archaeological sites where they've been.
So cool.
Yeah, this is super cool. And you see, it's a very weird apparatus that is two chambers connected by three hollow tubes. And they've been making, they've been distilling from in these capacha vessels, they call. And they were able to obtain high alcohol content on the distill. So there is enough evidence, and there is a great topic. It's still a lot of debate going on. There is some historians, some archaeologists, they're still not convinced. But I say, this is like the body of Christ. This proves it is a material elements that they've been submitted to very thorough tests. There was biomolecular analysis done in the original capacha, and they found residuals of agave matter in the bottom chamber, in the upper chamber, across, all through the tubes. So I think we're getting close, and it's a great conversation that is going on in the academic and science world. So apparently these spirits that we love, and we want to talk about it, they have the origins a lot earlier than what we thought, because the conventional history tells us that the distillation in Mesoamerica began after the arrival of the Europeans.
Right.
Question marks on that. So it is a very old spirit. Yeah.
Which I think is so important when people are getting introduced to this category. When you think about spirits from all over the Americas or all over the world, you have to think about, plant spirits are essentially an agricultural product, right? And the really amazing thing about tequila is that tequila comes from agaves, and agaves are endemic. They're from this area. So for the longest time, everyone thought, okay, endemic material that's been used, proven for many hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, using the agave fibers for sewing, for construction, using the agave for so many things. Later on, using the agave to ferment and creating pulque and drinking this beer-like agave ferment. It was always thought that you took this endemic fermentation, the Spanish arrived, taught everyone how to distill, and now you have this mestizo distillate. Chances are, David and I are both of the opinion that actually this was happening before the Spanish, before the colonizers ever got here. So it's a really interesting thing to think of when you're thinking about the identity of what tequila is.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to see so many people who are getting into the category and study the category. I have news for you guys. You have a lot of very interesting and exciting discoveries and learn more about this category. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. This seminar is just the tip of the iceberg, really. And you're going to get at the end of it a way to contact David and I. We both love to geek out on agave all day, every day. So reach out. We're here. Okay, so moving on, we're going to define what tequila is. Now we've gone a little bit of the history. the slide that we have right up now, defining tequila, give a brief overview. Number one, tequila is made out of the blue agave, right? But theoretically, it's only 51% blue agave. The reason being, agaves take a long time to grow. We'll get into this in a little bit, and they're expensive. It takes up a lot of land, a lot of time to grow. So the idea was, okay, in order to legally call it tequila, 51% blue agave. The other 49% can literally be whatever, with the exception of other agaves, which is antithetical and weird. People in Mexico can literally buy corn syrup from Arkansas, ferment it, distill it, put it into tequila, and call it tequila. But you can't take other agaves endemic from the regions of tequila making and put them into tequila and call it tequila, for other reasons we can geek out on another time. But that's the reason why frequently you might have someone in your bar, in your establishment, or somewhere saying, oh no, I don't touch tequila. I got really sick one time. No way, can't touch it. Well, you should ask them if perhaps they drank a 100%, 100% blue agave tequila, because then at least you know what you're drinking. There's more than that we'll get into now. But if you're drinking a mixto, a so-called mixto tequila, there's a good chance you're drinking who knows what. And if you're drinking who knows what, that's a good way to not feel good the next day. It's a good way to not, to get yourself into trouble. So, yeah. So we said that tequila must be from the Tequiliana Weber Azul. Tequila can be aged or not aged. We're going to go into production and all that. And as we've gone into, the tequila production has gone from the 17th century. So why are we talking about this? I'm going to read this quote right here, or you guys can see it. Tequila is booming, right? If you're taking this class, hopefully you're taking it because you don't know much about it. But the fact is, tequila has grown exponentially as a category over the last 10 years. It's gone from a cheap thing for college kids to high-end by high-end celebrities. And we are here to give you the information that not all tequila is created equal. And I would say that if you look at these numbers, a 706% increase since 2002, these numbers from 2017, I would say that 500% of that 706% is maybe not the best tequila, right? So we're here to educate you on the whole category, but also try to point you in the right directions of what makes a good tequila. These are the states of the tequila that it's made in. Now, we're going to discuss the tequila making process. Now that we have a little bit of history, a little bit of like why we're here, we're going to discuss the tequila making process. And I would like to kind of talk about this first. David, if we want to talk about agave, first of all, let's talk about the blue agave as a plant, and then its reproductive process and the process of growing an agave, the importance of having a nice, beautiful agave as opposed to maybe a not ripe, beautiful agave.
Well, they are pretty amazing plants. All the agaves are self-sufficient. They really, you plant them and they take care of themselves. They don't need irrigation. That is a cultivation industry that doesn't have to worry about hydro maintain. These plants can survive for years without rain, without irrigation. They're equipped with a pretty amazing metabolism that allows them to survive even in the most hostile conditions. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to talk about the Tequilana Weber because Jalisco is not as, in the biodiversity of agaves, it's not as rich as Oaxaca. Oaxaca has the highest biodiversity of agaves, but Jalisco is one of the most prolific states when it comes to biodiversity. And besides the agave Tequilana Weber, we have a lot of other endemic agaves from that state. Mm-hmm. And we obviously, if we go back in history and the culture of tequila or Vino Mezcal de Tequila, which was the original name of tequila, All these plants, they're endemic from that region. They were accepted, they were culturally accepted, and there was no regulations back then, but they were using to make vino mezcal de tequila. The agave tequilana, however, was selected by a self-regulated industry, tequila, use it, because out of all the varietals of agaves that we have in Mexico, is the agave that has the higher sugar content, so you need less kilos to make more liters. It's the agave to reach maturity in the fastest period of time, so you don't have to wait that long for the raw material to reach, the optimum conditions of maturity. And also it's the most prolific plant to give us more offshoots. That way we can take them from the mother plant and replant them. That was the reason. There is no other than economical reasons what tequila is self-regulated and use a plant that it makes more economical sense. Saying that, we create a monocultive in the region. And then you're talking about the quality IB, which is very important to produce this amazing spirit. When we have a monocultive, and we also change over the 100 years, the methods of reproduction, because the plants reproduce via blooming the flowers, cross-pollination is a sexual reproduction where you have vectors to move pollen from plant to plant, but also they reproduce via hijuelos, offshoots, which are clones of a mother plant. This reproduction is the only reproduction that we use in the tequila industry, which means it creates a situation where it's only 2 clones across the denomination of origin of tequila on the agave tequilana weber. That brings us to a situation where the producers of agave, they have weaker and weaker plants. Therefore, and here's where the quality of agave comes to, the big question. These conditions of the plants, the weakness of the plant, force the industry to introduce more and more agrochemicals to protect a plant that is genetically weak.
Right.
So that's a very interesting topic. We are less and less successful to find good agave tequilana weber in the denomination of origin. And another occasion we will talk about the bat-friendly project, but it's one of the options, one of the alternatives they see is that producers of agave try to go back to cross-pollination, to reproduction, where the plants relearn what they forget because genetically they don't receive that information, how to protect themselves from the natural enemies in their ecosystems where they develop. So it is very important to take care of these plants in order to have quality tequila. I mean, if it's healthy agaves, we're going to have the opportunity to have an exquisite raw material to convert that into tequila.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, the analogy I always say is that agaves, right, for everyone who's listening, it's not like we're doing growing a grain that grows in a season. It's not like we're growing a grape that grows in a season. Granted, the vines are old. We're growing these agaves, these kind of robust, spiky plants, and they take 6 to 10 years, rapidly getting younger, probably more at 6 or 8 years to grow. So there's a lot of information stored within those agaves. Additionally, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but about the reproduction, about how we have this problem, as David was saying, of just using clones to reproduce, rather than, you can see in this photo, this tree-like stalk coming up out of the agaves. That's sexual reproduction. But when that happens, all the sugars go out of the agave, it becomes worthless. It's the reason why the industry has decided not to. But the result is essentially everyone has the same DNA. So imagine if you're going to go out and buy a dog and you buy a purebred, and the purebred has a bad immune system and its hips go out, and it's not necessarily the healthiest of animals. Whereas if you buy a mutt, somehow that's a lot more resilient, right? So the same thing can be said for agaves. And additionally, we are in really dangerous times that because everything's a clone, because everyone has the same DNA, I'm not sure if you're familiar with phylloxera, the disease that killed many, all of the grapes in Europe, if we get a phylloxera of agaves for the blue agave, we have no immunity right now because everyone's the same. So it's really important that you look up something like the BAT project that basically is dedicating itself to trying to create more biodiversity inside the agave ecosystem. And actually, one of the people who has been very on the forefront of this project makes tequila for Beam Suntory, who's a sponsor for here. With El Tesoro, Carlos Camarena is really kind of spearheading this mission, and that's just, more people should do it. More people should do it. So agaves have terroir, and David is the most excellent person at talking about this, but as you know, terroir exists. It's a term that people usually use in wine. It's a reason why Chardonnay from France tastes different than Chardonnay from California. It has to do with your weather, your soil material, cultural influences even. But in tequila, we generally speak of having a highlands and a lowlands, or the valley of tequila. And I'm going to have David talk about this because unlike having something that grows for 6 months or 2 months or a year, these plants are growing for many, many years. So the amount of information and flavor information they're taking from their growing, from their terroir, is very important. So I'm gonna have David talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I basically, begin all our mission and our projects on agave spirits based on the concept of terroir. In the case of agave spirits, let's just put mezcal and tequila. We're talking about denominations of origin or geographical indications or terroirs. Pretty much the same, These denominations of origin, they are the largest ones in the world. They're geographically speaking. So these translate in that when you talk about terroir, you have agaves to grow from basically sea level. In the case of tequila, we have plantations there at a very low elevations. Mm-hmm. In the case of mezcal, we have agaves to grow at 8,500 feet above sea level. So just imagine climate. When we talk about terroir, we have to talk about climate. So we have microclimates in the most incredible way to no other denomination of origin has. Terrain, the same thing. I mean, we have agaves to grow in volcanic soil, in high plateaus, in slopes. It's just endless, the conditions where the agaves and these very resilient plants, they can pretty much grow in any different terroirs. But for me, and I always emphasize on this, the most interesting thing about the agave spirits terroirs is 3,500 years of knowledge. I mean, if you think about it, we have people, wisdom in humans that is being communicated generation after generation that is very valuable for me. I mean, the cultural aspect of tequila and mezcal is like no other category in the world. And that's why it's so important to look at, as Ivy, bringing this presentation, approaching from the terroir perspective. You cannot avoid it. And if we focus in the terroirs from tequila, there is, as we mentioned in the beginning, the first slide says the denomination of origin of tequila embraces 5 states. But about 95% of the total production of tequila comes from the state of Jalisco. And the state of Jalisco is divided in 2 main regions. We have the high plateaus of Arandas, Atotonilco, Jesus Maria, where it's very prolific on agave growing. But we also have the volcanic, the low valleys, the valles, the bajos. There is also has a completely different terroir, different climate, different soil conditions, and different culture. Mm-hmm. So that's gonna reflect on flavor profiles. And that's one of the beautiful things about tequila. There is also, like wine, depending where it's coming from, should show the organoleptic characteristics generated by the conditions of where the agaves grow and the hand of the maker, Mm-hmm. And also when we start to go into the industrialization of tequila, those elements are pretty much diluted by mm-hmm. the efficiency of mm-hmm. new methods of production. That's why it's very, very important. I mean, you mentioned El Tesoro de Don Felipe, which is one of the sponsors. I mean, Carlos Camarena is a clear example of how you can produce an interesting amounts of tequila, but maintaining quality and ethics of production and transparency. And, you know, I'm very happy when I invite Carlos to be part of the Bud Friendly Project. It was not just because I see him as a mentor to me, but I know it's a person who has an incredible level of integrity and influence on people that we want to do the right things on the tequila. So terroirs, agaves, the flavor profiles are fascinated on this category.
Excellent, Tim. So let's just do a quick little flavor breakdown. So generally, I remember many years ago, I saw you speak at Well, and you gave a really excellent example of why maybe tequila that comes from the highlands with its root system and the way rain falls is different from the valley. Can you give that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, the highlands, if we talk about the highlands is a region that due to the elevations, due to the weather conditions, the agaves to grow there, they're going to be agaves, they are exposed to lower temperatures, to drier temperatures. And the metabolisms of the agaves, they're going to be affected by those factors. So we have the tendency on agaves is the less rain precipitation, the cooler climate slow down the metabolisms. Therefore, they live longer. Therefore, agaves on that region have the tendency to generate a lot more sugar content. Therefore, you're going to have tequilas with a flavor profiles. They have the tendency to be sweeter. They're more floral, more herbal, more grassy. There are tequilas that, you know, the descriptor that I like to use instead of the smooth thing. I don't like that descriptor for tequila.
Yeah. Stop saying smooth, people. No one likes it.
Yeah. I like to say there are tequilas due to those characteristics they take from those agaves to grow in that region. They're more approachable. They're easier to be introduced into our sensors. When you go to the low elevations, warmer climate, more minerality because there's volcanic soil, you know, it's a lot more rain precipitation there. So the agaves have the tendency to reach maturity a little bit earlier, less sugar content, and some of the characteristics that you want to find in those tequilas, they're more robust tequilas, spicy, minerality, saltiness. You're going to have those characteristics that they are directly connected to the conditions where the agave grow. So when you are thinking on, you know, do a pairing or make a cocktail, these are elements that obviously have to take in consideration. You know, if you know that it's a good example of a lowland tequila, you're going to have a very good base to develop a cocktail, you know.
Yes, exactly. And we're going to go into that a little bit further, but I think it's really important that people realize that there's these differences, and the differences are only as important as how the tequila is made. So we're going to go into that now. You know, a good agave means nothing if it is not produced in the best way for that agave. So harvesting. Now that we have these agaves, right, hopefully they're grown for a long time, no chemical interaction, or as little chemical interaction as possible. Now we have to harvest the agaves. Now, what's interesting about harvesting the agaves is that there is no machine that can do the job of what we call the jimador. The jimador is the man, generally, who cuts the agaves, which grow with these massive spikes, and you have to shave these spikes off. They're called pencas. They're the leaves. And you get the piña, or the heart, the actual agave that you need for roasting, the cooking that will come later. So you cut these agaves and detach them from their pretty serious root systems with a round bladed knife. Almost looks like a flattened sharp frying pan called a koa. This is called a jima. The jimador is the one who cuts the pencas. And this process it's not just cut this one down, or it shouldn't be. The really important part about getting good tequila is ensuring that the agaves are ripe. Now, how do you know if the agaves are ripe? What you don't do is go into a field 5 years after you put these little hijuelos, the little clones, into the ground and say, this field is done, and take people in and cut down on the agaves, because agaves are like people. They mature at different levels, right? Probably around the same time, but in your first grade, second grade, third grade class, you're gonna have people at different reading levels, right? So you probably shouldn't harvest them all at the same time. And what you should do is you should look for an agave. You can tell it's ripe when you can look at it and you can see that it has some red marks, right? Where the leaves go in, there's some red. Also, you'll look at it and those big spikes that I talked about in the tippy top, they're kind of sunk in a little bit because there's so much sugar. It's like a big ripe peach. And the analogy I always use is, if we're in summer right now, and I live in New York City, so I go to the farmer's market, and peaches are just starting to show up. But if I go and I get a peach, and it's like still hard because it's not ripe, hasn't been on the tree for long enough, then I go home and I stick it into a brown paper bag, and then a few days later, it's not actually ripening, it's rottening, but soft, and it's fine, I can eat it, it's good. But then when I go a few weeks later and I take a bite of this peach that's actually ripe, and I take a bite and the juices are running down my arm, and it's the sweetest peach I've ever had in my entire life, now that's what we want, right? So the same thing goes for a field of agaves, right? On one tree, they're all the same peach, right? But they ripen in different times. We should pick the ones that are ripe. The same ones go for the agave, right? So it's really important to take a nice ripe agave, because the riper the agave, the higher the Brix level, the more flavor that you can get from the terroir that we just talked about. And if you cook it, which we'll go into now, in certain ways, you can highlight these flavors and make a really excellent tequila. Did I miss anything?
No, it's beautiful the way you describe it. Yes, the only thing that if I may add is the type of himas, which is very important. Mm-hmm. This is something that is not used that much anymore, and also it's affected when we have these peaks on prices. Mm-hmm. Of agave, that affects how the hima is going to be ordered by distillery or by the buyers of agave. But traditionally, and it's something that it makes is the second most important step in the beginning of the process. Obviously the first step is to have a great agaves, great quality of agaves, but also it's something that we don't talk that much anymore, is the type or hima. As you mentioned, Ivy, if the agaves are perfectly ripe, and if you're in a region that it has a high sugar concentration, you can balance that sweetness by the type of hima that you applied into the agave. And culturally and historically, we have three types of himas. It's the hima rasurada, hima normal, and hima alta. That's how, if you talk to a good experienced himador, he's going to be capable to have a very hard and very precise cut into the pencas, into the agave, to leave just the right amount of hima attached, of penca attached to the piña, because in that part of the agaves, we're going to have a high concentrations of bitterness. Mm-hmm. Of the bitter honeys they're going to be produced during the conversion. So we can balance flavors before we even bring the agaves into the distillery. So this type of process is, I've been very interested and tasting in every batch that we produce, is to be sure that we take a reading of the Brix that we have in the agave, and depending on the agave, the sugar content that we have in the piñas is the type of hima that we apply. Yes. And for that, you need a very, very good himador, and that's why I always emphasize in the importance to preserve the culture of himador, to treat the himadores with respect, and to have also an economical benefits for them. Yes. So that's a very interesting topic also that we should talk.
I think now's a good time to talk about before we go into cooking. There are certain tequila producers that are estate grown, right? They grow their agaves, they harvest their agaves, when we'll go into the roasting later, and then they bottle their tequila and they make it. But there are lots of people who have to buy their agaves on the open market, and there is problems, shall we say, sometimes with how this market works and the price of agave. And I'm going to have W talk a little bit about what this means, buying agaves on the open market, how much it costs to buy agaves on the open market. It changes time to time, but also wanting to discuss a little bit about how much it costs to produce a bottle of tequila based on how much agaves cost purely, and what we should be looking for when we're purchasing a bottle based on how much agaves cost.
Well, the agave is a commodity. It became a commodity just like oil, just like sugar, just like coffee. Right now, we are going through the most critic and most difficult in the history of tequila conditions on the agave. We never in the history of the industry, the prices of agave per kilo, they've been as high as they are right now. Let me put it this way. Back 7 years ago, we were paying less than 1 peso per kilo. Today, just last week, I went to Mexico and I purchased 20 tons of agave for a small batch of Siembra Valles, and I had to pay 27 pesos per kilo.
So that's about $4?
27 pesos is about $1.75 per kilo. And using a very traditional methods of production, we need about 9 kilos of agave to make 1 liter. So just on the agave, before we even bring the agaves to the distillery, we pay already, over $11, over $12 of just on the raw material. That gives you an idea of where and how much it costs to produce tequila. Now, talking about the jimadores, a jimador is making only about $10 per ton, about $12 to harvest a ton of agave. That's nothing, because that $12, it has to be split among the cuadrillas, they call the team of jimadores, which are between 5 to 7 guys. So it is very, very unfair, the prices that we give, these prices of agave. That's on the benefit of the profits don't trickle down to the very important member of the chain of production, if not the most important. So it's a very, very challenging times for the tequila and agave spirits category due to the prices. And this is an interesting situation, because we think if we take a look at the inventories that are there, according to the Regulatory Council of Tequila, which has a very efficient way of traceability, and we know exactly how many agaves are in the fields, because if you want to use agaves to make tequila, you have to register each plant to the Regulatory Council of Tequila. So we noticed that we have enough agave that is on the mature age to supply the demand, even if the demand increased drastically. But we don't know why the prices are still in a very unsustainable levels. This does not benefit many people. It's benefit few people or few companies that are speculating with the agave, with the raw material. It's a way to pressure, competition, which happens in coffee, which happens in sugar, which happens in oil. When you have big conglomerates who get into a merchandise, a product, a commodity, things can turn the way we're seeing right now in agave spirits. Yeah.
And so next time you all go out and buy a bottle of 100%, which now you will do, 100% blue agave tequila, ask yourself why it only costs $15. There's a problem.
That's what I always say. How come if the raw material cost, let's say, let's be fair, but it's tequilas that I unfortunately or fortunately I don't consume. We're talking about 9 kilograms to make a liter because we use traditional methods.
Mm-hmm.
Efficiency, it plays a big role here, right? Because if you have high efficiency, you're gonna need less kilos to make a liter. Right. So we're gonna go to the process, we're gonna see diffusers. In the diffuser, you have more efficiency, so you're gonna need, let's say, even 4 kilos, let's go very low, of agave to produce 1 liter. Right there, you have what? It's $8 per yes raw material. That's before you buy glass, labels, transportation, taxes, and the distribution cost. Mm-hmm. So for me, when somebody shows to me at the door of my restaurant and offer me a tequila that is less than $20, I don't even have time to talk to them. Yeah. Because I know that I'm buying something that it doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. It's like you're gonna buy a bottle of cognac for $15. What kind of cognac is that?
Right. Exactly. It's important that people think about that. So let's go into the different cooking methods now. So now that we have our agave that's been planted and grown for many years and harvested by a humidor and hopefully is very ripe, we can cook the agave because agaves they're really hard. They, imagine if you could have like a very young, like a very young pineapple that's just like starchy. It's almost like wood. So you need to transform these starchy, fibrous materials into sugar. And the way you do that is by cooking it, okay? And you can do this in a number of different ways. The most traditional method is in an horno, or an oven, basically a big brick oven. You can see pictures here of the different methods. A big brick oven that you can, it's big. It's like the size of a large closet or a bathroom even. It's a big thing. You shove it full of agaves, you lock the door, and you use steam, right? You steam this whole thing up, and you steam these agaves for a certain amount of hours. Now, it can range. Some people do 24, it's not very long. People do a warm-up process sometimes. It can go 72 hours in a resting process. People cook their agaves in these hornos in different types of ways, and the result, they have different results. The next type of cooking method is something called an autoclave. And an autoclave, you can see this picture over to your left, is basically a giant pressure cooker, and similar to a pressure cooker that became popular in the 60s and 70s, add pressure to cooking equals less time cooking. So you've already waited for years for this agave to grow. You have to harvest it with this guy that takes a long time. And there is a desire to maybe pick up the cooking process. So in an autoclave, you can roast for much less time, being able to convert those sugars, those starches to sugars in a quicker time frame. The last process, and this is kind of the, for agave nerds like David and I, probably our least favorite method, is something called a diffuser. So a diffuser is a big old machine that some people tout as being almost environmentally friendly because it's efficient. But what it does is essentially cuts up agaves that are uncooked into little things like the size of your thumb or like a piece of kindling, and injects these things with steam and water and heat to extract the sugars from these particles, from these materials. Now, the benefit is that you get like almost all the sugar out of these fibers, out of these little fibers. The detriment is all that stuff about terroir we're talking about before, all of the nuance, all of these things kind of get washed away. You're kind of like roasting the agave past, or like literally steaming it past the point of recognition. And sometimes chemicals are used, which is sad. No one likes chemicals. No one likes to drink them or eat them, or we should try not to. And the way that I describe agave cooking, roasting these agaves, and the importance of it is, think about your Thanksgiving, right? on your Thanksgiving, you don't roll out of bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hack your turkey apart with a knife and stick it in the microwave, right? Because it will probably be chewy, and that raw turkey meat turning into cooked turkey meat is going to be gross. It's kind of going to just be sticky and chewy and not good. You're probably going to wake up at 3 a.m., stick that turkey in the oven at a nice slow roast. It's going to roast all day. You're going to baste it. You're going to do your thing. And then many, many hours later, you're going to take the turkey out of the oven, and opposed to the one that's been put in that, microwave or that pressure cooker, maybe a little bit, certainly better than the microwave. The pressure cooker is better. But the one from the oven that's been roasting for hours, the meat falls off the bone. It's super tender. The skin is just so. This is kind of the way you want to look at it.
The mouth is getting watery.
Yeah. Well, that's the way you kind of want to look at your agave roasting, right? So, so that's the way that I always think about looking at it. And this is not to say that I personally don't drink diffuser tequilas, but that's not to say, I do think that there are some good autoclave tequilas out there, people who are doing work with autoclaves that are good. But as far as like really getting the true expression of the agave, and David, you feel free to chime in, I think that the traditional oven method is really the way you want to go.
I think you have an excellent analogy, because, it's not just on agave, but any food that we process in the best possible way, in the slow cooking on meats, it makes a big difference. And I have an observation when people who favors the diffusers, that they say they're environmental friendly. The biggest problem that I have now, besides the crucifixion of the organoleptic elements inside of these monster machines, my biggest concern is that in order to maintain these machines, to make them sustainable, to make them profitable, you have to use large amounts of agave. Mm-hmm. So we are seeing in areas where we are demanding, we're using more agaves, because we have now the technology through diffusers than we are capable to produce, especially in mezcal. But in tequila, we talk about environmentally correct. This is one of the things that we see more and more often. The companies who have the access to these very expensive machines, but very efficient machines, they're using agaves that they're not even ripe.
Right.
They're not even reach maturity, because when you value the use of the soil for an extra 2 or 3 or even 4 years, or harvest that young agave, even if it's not ripe, but because the high level of efficiency that you have from these machines, you harvesting agaves that are not mature. You have, in a lot of occasions, harvesting agaves before they give us hijuelos. Mm-hmm. So you are shooting yourself in the foot as an industry, because you are creating a future challenges on the agro industry. Yeah. So very interesting. Those things are very interesting. Remember, in the category of agave spirits, the name of the game is time. You need time, before you start the process. In aged spirits, cognac, grain spirits, you take care of the time after you distill. Yes. Here it's backwards. You have to invest time before you even start the process. So
exactly.
Diffusers are a very, very sensitive topic that I think that the people that get deeper into the category realize very rapidly and easily that it's not the right choice for the future of the category.
Yes. So the next step is the crushing, shredding, and milling of the agaves. So after you cook the agave, agaves are actually more similar to like an artichoke than a pineapple. So imagine when you eat an artichoke, you kind of like this, and you get the meat off and there's still the fibers left. The same thing happens with agaves, right? So you have all of this sugar and yummy goodness kind of wrapped up in these stringy fibers. So you have to crush,
like sugar cane, right?
like sugarcane, yeah. So you have to crush up all these fibers and the sugars and add some water to get all those sugars and waters away to start fermentation. So if you use a diffuser, it's already done for you, right? It's already chopped up, it's already doing its thing. It probably has to be cooked afterwards in a diffuser because it doesn't actually have enough things to ferment, but you can just forget that. So then the next option is the traditional method is something called a tahona. And a tahona is, you see this picture over here, this was taken at Siete Leguas in Jalisco. You get these agaves, you kind of mash them up a little bit, you put them in a stone pit, you have a tractor or a donkey or a horse or a cow attached to this stone, and you go around and around in circles. And the pressure of this stone onto the agaves crushes everything up, shreds it up, so you have these like stringy fibers and this kind of sloppy beer-like substance. And you pick it all up and you drain this pit with the stone, and you put those fibers and to one side sometimes, and you put the juice to another, and you ferment. The other option is a mill, your classic mill. You see these in lots of times in sugarcane production. Basically, it's kind of like this crush, water, pulverization of sugarcane. Now, of agave. Now, there are different methods and modes to this. I will say that right now, the tahona is being commercialized at a super big rate. Everyone's like, it was crushed by a tahona. I think that's great. I think tahona crushed tequila is very good. You certainly don't pulverize these fibers to the point of like no return, which sometimes can happen in a mill. But David, feel free to chime in, but lots of people who say that they're made with tahona are not 100% tahona because it's really inefficient. You really don't get to get as much sugars out of the fibers as you'd like to. It's labor intensive. There are animals around. The Consejo Regulador de Tequila is kind of poking their nose around saying no more animals around the fibers. So there are complications here. But the traditional method is indeed with this kind of ancient milling system. Did I miss anything? Do you want to add anything?
No. You are right on target. The only thing is, it's interesting culturally, historically, just to add into the sugar mills that they traditionally use. That show us the influence of the Spaniards, because
Yes.
the Valles region. The Valles region was, before we became big in agave production and in as an industry, it was a sugarcane plantations. So a lot of the methods of production of sugar, they are seen they were adopted by tequila.
Mm-hmm.
Even the taonas, they call molino chileno.
Mm-hmm.
Chilean, they were used also for, the old traditional method of extraction was hand maceration,
Mm-hmm.
On the vino mezcal, the tequila. But no, it's just interesting to see the interaction of the European, the influence of the hacendados that start to produce vino mezcal using techniques from a sugaring industry adopted by tequila industry. And yes, it is not efficient, the tahona, as the sugar mills, and obviously as the diffuser, which is 2 steps in one inside that machine. Yeah. You got everything. Yeah.
All right. So the next step is fermentation. Now, fermentation is the one thing that has to happen before distillation, right? A distillation without something that's fermented, then you don't get booze. You get like a concentrated water formula, perhaps, but you do not get alcohol. So to make something ferment, you need sugar, you need water, and you need yeast. Okay, that's how you make beer, that's how you make wine, that's how you make wherever. Sugar comes from a bunch of different things. In our case, it comes from agave, right? So fermentation can happen in a couple different vessels. Stainless steel is the most common, probably right now, practice. The most traditional would be either in brick, like ancient times, in stone, digging holes into the ground, and you'd ferment inside these holes. And then wood as well, using these tinas, they're called, to ferment inside. Now, You can ferment either just with your beer, your agave beer, this sugary water, or you can ferment with those fibers also. There are different schools of thought. We won't go into too much depth here. I really like some bagasso. It's called bagasso. That extra fiber, we call it bagasso. I like it in my ferment. Some people even distill with it. Neither here nor there, just know it's a thing that happens. You can look into it, again, if you want to geek out, find David and I, we can geek out with you all day long. And fermentation can happen in a few different ways. Now, traditionally, there's yeast all around us, right? This is a reason why if you're like a bartender and you go into your shift one day and you shake up a bottle of, chamomile syrup and it explodes everywhere, that means it's fermented. Yeast can get into things and ferment everything. So airborne yeast is one way to ferment. Literally, put the agave beer into this area, wait. Sooner or later, you're going to start seeing these little bubbles. The yeast is eating the sugar, and all of a sudden, you're getting alcohol created. You're getting a ferment. Some people add yeast. It's becoming more popular. It's more efficient. It's more. It's easier to have more consistency in your product. Which, if you haven't gotten it yet, consistency and tequila are not best friends, right? Between terroir and yeast and whatever, it's very difficult to make your tequila taste the same way every single time. I'm of the opinion that maybe you should just not try it all. You'll get better tequila that way. But yeah, so people can put special proprietary yeasts into their ferments to try to get more consistency in their product and to try to control the ferment a little bit more, which is fine. Then people can put accelerators in their ferment, which is not so fine. Different chemicals, different levels of heat, different things to try to make the ferment happen quicker. Quick ferments aren't necessarily a good thing, kind of like everything else. If you haven't gotten the memo, things should take a little bit of time. Too much time equals different types of fermentation that maybe you don't want. This is not a fermentation class, but just know that these are the methods of fermentation. We're running a little bit quick on time, so I'm going to skip over quickly to distillation. Distillation. David, why don't you talk about distillation?
Well, it's the last step in the process of the distillery. Traditionally, the distillations they were using, they were done in copper stills. There's a beautiful picture of the Siete Leguas distill right there. It took place, I learned yesterday, that it's a very special day for your family, Ivy. Yeah. And that is very beautiful, that picture in many different ways. But distillation, that's a very good example of the old small alembics made out of copper. We like copper for distillation, not just on tequila, but in many spirits, because the chemical reactions, the way the temperature is conducted through the stills, is going to influence all the elements that are there on the fermented, all the characters, all the alcohols were created during fermentation. They're going to go through these distills, and they're going to preserve their value organoleptically speaking, but also this efficiency moved the industry into the stainless steel distills and then into column stills, which is efficiency. So tequilas, they are the most respected tequilas. They are available on the market. They have that part of the process in common. They use copper at least in one of the double distillations. Remember, tequila, in order to be tequila, has to be distilled minimum of 2 times. The first distillation, you don't even allow to call tequila. It's called an ordinary spirit. It's not until you go through the second distillation that you're going to be able to call tequila. It's going to be tequila blanco. So very important, this step is you're going to be able to preserve. You'll be very careful in every step of the process, from quality agaves, good himas, good process of cooking, and then the fermentation and distillation. Everything is linked to a final product. So we don't have that much time, so that's distillation in the best possible way most important topic.
Perfect. Yeah, if you want to geek out more about distillation, there's a lot out there. But yeah, get after us. So the next step, well, I know we don't have that much time. Well, it's okay. The next step is we can either bottle this, right? Bottle this tequila, or we can age it. And aging as a process, was originally not that traditional in tequila. Usually it's like, this is really good right off the still, let's drink it. But now we really look at, you see a lot of different types of aged tequila on the market, going from a silver blanco, white tequila, all to reposado, to añejo, to extra añejo, and now something called a cristalino. And
also the joven or gold tequila, which is the, unfortunately, liter-wise is the most popular tequila in the world. You know, the tequilas, they are blend of, you know, blanco with añejos or reposados, or even worse, that they are allowed to use artificial colors and artificial flavors, you know.
Yes.
Ironically, in mezcal, the mezcal joven is the real deal. In tequila, the tequila joven is a tequila that it has a lot of question marks. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and I think I just want to bring in really quick this note that, you know, aging, these statements that we have up here, it always says the minimum of the amount of time that the spirit has to be in a barrel. Now, traditionally, usually these are in old whiskey barrels, American whiskey barrels, American oak, because in American whiskey production, you use the barrel once. There's so much of them left over. You can get them relatively easily, and that's why people tend to age in them. But, you know, reposado, a minimum of 2 months in the barrel. Añejo, a minimum of a year. Extra añejo, a minimum of 3 years. However, there's no law telling you that you can't call anything over a year a reposado, right? So David actually has, can you tell a little bit about your reposado?
Well, it's the aniversarios. What I do is kind of like I do a satiric description of the, you know, I think that it's very important for tequila to have these classes. You know, we have 5 classes of tequila, but you can blend tequilas. You can bring it down, but you cannot bring it up. But I think that I don't believe on tequila has to be aged. You know, this has the roots in a classist society that we have in Mexico. A lot of the spirits, the European spirits, they dominate the market in Mexico for many generations. So we decide as a tequila industry to compete against those brown spirits, and we start to age tequilas. But I think, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people, the more they learn, the more they walk in to get deeper into tequila or mezcal, this is one spirit that doesn't need the help of the barrel really to be drinkable. So, you know, we play with these special editions, aniversarios, where we blend, you know, an extra añejo with a reposado, and we call it reposado. It's like, but how come it's a reposado with a 5-year-old tequila? I say, well, because the regulations allow you to do that. If that's right or that's wrong, I don't know, but it's funny, you know.
I know. I think it's just hilarious and great.
But, you know, because our niche goes to people who are, you know, very into it, the category, and this is an interesting thing to play with the regulations. It's not bad or it's not good. It's just funny that how flexible in many ways the regulation is. Yeah.
Excellent. And I'm not going to go into it very much. There's a new thing on the market called cristalinos, which is essentially an aged tequila that has carbon filtered out all of its age, or its color, etc. I'm not going to go into it much because I think it's crazy. So, but you know, if that's your thing, if you feel like paying extra money for a white spirit that was made brown and aged and then made white again, that's on you. I don't think it's really worth the cash, but that's okay. Oh, do you have one even?
Well, no, not in this house.
Yeah, I was like, what?
No, what I'm gonna show is, you know, traceability. That's something I think is very important. You know, one of the things that we're doing, because we like traceability And when it comes to this process, there are questions in all the labels of this stinky brand is always a technical data. That's something that I've been pushing for years. And here in this technical data, we have step by step. It's not very focused. Step by step, you know, how this tequila became this tequila. So I think that's the future of the industry.
Yeah.
It depends on the way to grow, to keep growing as an industry, with transparency and traceability.
Yes.
That's
I
very
agree.
important for this category because it really matters, you know, where the agave come from, who handled the agave, how it was handled. So all those facts are very, I'm very optimistic on the new generations of tequila lovers who are, because we have access to a lot of information, and with people like Ivy in the category, I feel very comfortable that we're going to be able to get more demanding, better quality in order to.
It is important. I mean, there's the future of tequila depends on smart consumers, like people watching this seminar.
Exactly.
So I want to wrap up a little bit with cocktails, right? So this is Tales of the Cocktail. People talk about cocktails. There's different tequila you can use in cocktails. Hopefully you've learned about some of that base spirit here. But probably the two most famous classic cocktails made with tequila are the margarita. The margarita is actually the #1 sold cocktail in the country, in the United States of America, which is both good and bad. I feel like most margaritas out there are bad. Most margaritas out there are made with sour mix and not fresh citrus and really bad tequila. So up here, I'm putting in 2 classic cocktails, the most famous of which is the margarita. This is my recipe, the one that we serve at Leyenda, my bar. To be a margarita, in my personal humble opinion, you need to have a triple sec in there. Margarita means daisy. A daisy is a cocktail that has a spirit, a citrus, and a liqueur for sweetener. It's not a sour. That being said, Julio Bermejo is a close friend of mine. He owns Tommy's in San Francisco. He has made famous the Tommy's margarita that is made using agave nectar instead of Cointreau or triple sec. If that's what you want to do, it is cheaper to make, that's for sure, because it has agave nectar. But just as tequila can be made in unfavorable situations and environments, so too can agave nectar. Just be careful what you're buying. But I personally think that a margarita is a margarita made with tequila, 100% blue agave. In the slide here, you can see different ones I suggest. I think it's awesome to compare a Highland margarita compared with a Valley margarita. I would say that if you have people in your environment that are new to tequila, I might try a Highland tequila before I try a Valley tequila. It's a little bit more accessible. But me personally speaking, I prefer my margaritas with Valley tequila. I find the pepper and the robustness can combat with the Cointreau. I will also mention that I don't think there's any substitution for Cointreau. If you're going to use a triple sec, I think that's the one to use. It has 80%, it's 80 proof, 40% ABV, and I find that it just adds more to the margarita. The next drink is, when you go to Mexico, there's not that many margaritas to be had, believe it or not. People drink something called a paloma, and traditionally palomas are grapefruit soda, squirt, a little bit of lime, tequila, top it off, maybe throw a pinch of salt in there. Honestly, there are people out there, and I'm one of them, that thinks that a grapefruit soda paloma is just the way to go, but we are living in the age of freshness. So I want to give the fresh paloma recipe that we use. Again, this is made with blanco. If you want to experiment with reposado, I wouldn't recommend an añejo with this. Save those for your old fashions. But you do 2 ounces of tequila, fresh grapefruit juice, fresh lime juice, and some simple syrup and top with soda. It's delicious. Going on a little bit about cocktail creation, when you're creating your cocktails, be sure to recognize that a Valley tequila compared to a Highland tequila is going to bring different things to your cocktails, right? So take the example of if you're going to make a tequila Negroni, I highly recommend using a valley tequila because it has a pepper in the notes to bite through the Campari. It can combat a little bit, whereas a Highland tequila might get a little bit more lost, right? So really make sure you're tasting your tequilas, because not every tequila is created equal. And even if you have like the best distillates available, the terroir really comes through. So if you're passionate about your own unique tequila creations, really think about the different qualities and characters that tequila brings to your cocktails, and you will be, better set up and better prepared to make cocktails that way. And if you want any more inspiration, shameless plug, pick up my book. There's more stuff in there. One last thing about tequila. Jalapeno tequila is very popular right now. In order to make a good jalapeno infusion, you must have a good distillate. And I really recommend using a Valley tequila for your jalapeno infusions. It just packs more punch. The pepper and the spice pairs better with the jalapeno. And you can get the recipe by emailing me or by buying my book. It's not hard. And I can tell you from experience, jalapeno infused drinks are always the #1 sellers just about anywhere you go. So to conclude, hopefully if you've learned nothing else, you have to remember 100% agave is not enough. Okay, we have more out there that we have to think about, more out there we have to be passionate about. The agave has to be this tequila, yes, 100%, hopefully. Then it has to be grown with respect, harvested with respect, fermented with respect, distilled with respect, aged with respect. And in the end, you will hopefully get a beautiful distillate that you can yourself can drink. You can put those into your cocktails should you so want. If you want to contact myself or David, our information here is down here for Instagram. And I think that is it. I'm not sure if I've forgotten anything, but David, anything you want to add?
Nothing, just to thank everybody to be part of this seminar, and thank you for your interest on the category. And thank you, Ivy and Tales of the Cocktail and the sponsors for allow this seminar to take place. Yeah, that's really a pleasure and honor.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Drink better tequila.